We talked about planning on a general basis. Let's get more specific about it because it's a huge component of every single manager and leader's job to do. And if you're going to be a leader, you need to plan well because leaders tend to look longer term than managers. So let's think about the process. There's four kinds of planning that are out there. Strategic planning is that planning that you're looking at. What do you plan on doing 3 years plus for your organization? This is long-term planning. Years ago when I first started teaching management, I had to sit down there. My quote that back then was 5 years plus, way back a long time ago. But now the world has gotten so fast. Now we reduce it down to 3 years. Strategic planning is big picture because you're looking way out there what it's going to be like. And then you turn around and you break that down into different kinds of planning and different goals. Strategic is 3 years plus. Tactical planning, you take those big picture items in strategic planning. And by the way, strategic planning relies an awful lot on your mission statement and your vision statement. You want to accomplish what those things say. So you sit down there and you actually plan to do the things you say you're going to do. Tactical tends to be 1 to 3 years in scope. So you're going to lay out tactical planning, and the tactical planning, you're going to sit down there and take those strategic plans, chop them up in pieces, and sit down and say, in year one, I want to accomplish this, year two, this, and year three. You don't have to be 100% accurate. Strategic planning is never accurate. That's not the intention to be accurate. You got to be about 80% accurate. And that way, if in case you're a corporation and with stock to the public, you can make sure that they can expect the following over here, but you're never going to be 100% accurate as to where you're going to be in 3 years. If you hit 80%, life is good. Tactical planning is 1 to 3 years, and you should start refining that strategic plan down to what it's going to be like in 1 to 3 years. Operational is typically 1 year and less. Operational is where you sit down and you take those objectives and goals. The objectives usually end up in tactical, but they can be in operational. But really, those goals are clearly operational nature because you want to reach certain different milestones to make certain that you reach your operational plans. And then that leads to your tactical plans. And that leads into, are you accomplishing the things in your strategic plan? Planning should be reviewed annually on a regular basis with the right people involved at the table. Contingency is just an emergency. What happens over here? If you go back historically in the United States on 9/11, when we had the terrorist attack of the Twin Towers in New York, we looked at that and all of a sudden they had no plan as to what to do with the terrorist attack. That said, what they did is they took a nuclear strike plan and they followed that instantly. They put the president, vice president, planes, different areas of the sky, and they also sat down and shut down all the airports. There's a lot of speculation that when they shut down the airports, that they might have prevented some additional terrorism from striking LA, Chicago, and Dallas on top of that. So that being said, did they save lives with that planning? Yes. Did they have a plan for that? No, but the planning for contingencies, you can sit down and just the fact you're knowing that I have it for this thing over here. Sometimes just the planning and the talking about it, boom, can sit down there and help you prevent a really disaster in your organization, or in some cases, maybe a country in the whole process. So strategic, broad, long range, tactical, 1 to 3 years. Strategic is 3 plus. 1 to 3. Contingency plan is a backup plan, and operational is usually we're going to have your goals and your objectives as well. So, does AI mean the end of managers? You're going to see a lot of work being performed by a lot of AI. What I've been reading about is that the number one area is going to be affected by artificial intelligence is not what you think. It's going to probably be the IT people because AI is going to take out a lot of the coding aspect of it. I don't know about you. You can get on Chat GPT right now and write some pretty good computer code, even if you don't know what you're doing. It'll help you along. So you're going to be seeing a lot of changes there. And then secondly, accounting is going to be affected by that. So you're looking at middle management is vulnerable as well as lower level, but you're going to see a lot of people changing their jobs if you can adapt with AI. It's a good plan. Contingencies, there's a lot of different planning there. So think about what you need for your organization. And really, when it comes to decision making, your job is to choose and find the best alternative. So planning, decision making, they go hand in hand. And that decision making is what makes or breaks leaders. Leaders make a decision or too often blame someone else for it. That's pretty common out there. If you work at an executive level, I've had college presidents, they sit down and they ask me my opinion, and they're not because they trust my opinion. They're asking my opinion because they want to have somebody to blame. Well, I talked to him over here, and he's the one that said I should do this, so he's at fault. So be careful. Don't be a sucker for some weak leader who can't make a decision. Sometimes you say, that's your call. Now, the problem is I had one president, he's calling me for my advice as vice chancellor. And what happened was he would go fishing. If I didn't give him the right answer, he would go to my executive director, then he went to my general director, and then he would go down to a management team and finally find a classified person, the lowest level in my department, an HR recruiter, and say, what do you think? And then somebody up in HR said, and that way you could find somebody to blame. Decision makers, if you have this kind of thing, deal with it, confront them on it, put it in writing, make sure you have that, make certain that leaders are out there. Here is really the decision-making process. Define the problem or the situation. You need to do that. That's the very first thing. Otherwise, if you don't clearly define what the problem is, you're going to be solving things that are not the problem. They'll be surface issues, but not the problem itself. Find out what is the situation, what the problem is, collect the information, develop alternatives to solve the real problem, and then which one is the best, and do what you should do, and then make certain your decision was a good one, because you're going to go back and check it, and then go back to the beginning, nonstop. That is a good process. Put this in your notes. Keep the slide when you sit down and elevate yourself to high levels. This is a big deal. These 6 steps are normal for regular decision making and for problem solving. Brainstorming. Brainstorming really is great with a group, particularly a small group, where everybody sits there, they have a problem, and you say, yo, let's all do this. You have this magic thing. It's really magic. It's called a sticky note. Yes, little post-its. Everybody gets them, and they sit down there and they write their solution, and they go stick it on a wall. And then nobody sits there and says, that's too expensive. That's not smart. You just sit down there and think. No cost or anything else. And then once you lay out all your brainstorming, your little notes, then you sit down and then you quantify them. How much will they cost? Are they really feasible? What about this? And then you consolidate. You would be surprised how some ideas that sound harebrained and crazy actually are brilliant or at the beginning of a whole different pathway of thinking. Brainstorming is fabulous in the aspect of going through trying to solve problems because we get multiple minds thinking. And that's why diversity, especially in business, really is about brains. Do you have different kinds of brains working on the problem? That's the most critical part. Intellectual diversity is what makes organizations hum and hum very well. You also have a couple other out there. You sit down, use PMI, where you list all the pluses for a solution, one column, and minuses another, and so on. That works, but brainstorming can be a lot of fun. Decision-making by CEOs, here's some of the issues. Keep global businesses in mind, identify risk before they grow. That's a big deal. Solve the problem before it becomes bigger. Change strategies and models with the times, really manage relations with governments, and also adjust to make important tasks over. Know what SWOT is: strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Know the 4 types of planning: strategic, tactical, operational, and contingency. And the toughest part of decision making, and that always is defining the problem or the situation. Take care.